2019, we did what we called our Great Lakes Adventure, and we sailed up the Trent Severn Waterway, and we explored 4 of the Great Lakes. We couldn't get to Superior because we ran out of summer, but that was a wonderful trip. And then we had a little thing called a pandemic, and we're back on Lake Ontario. And then in 2021, we wanted to keep moving, so we sailed from Toronto to Newfoundland. That took us about 4 months, one of our best adventures ever. And then in 2022, we picked up that adventure and we sailed south, made it all the way to the Bahamas. We switched boats. We bought a new one along the way, sold the old one. And since 2023, we have been primarily in the Caribbean. We have sailed Bahamas, Turks Caicos, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, British Virgin Islands, and in about a month and a half, Alan is going to be heading back to beautiful Puerto Rico to get our boat ready to continue on. This year we hope to make it, well, we don't hope, we plan to make it all the way to Grenada. And maybe next year we'll be back to tell you about that trip. Alan's going to tell you a bit about our vessel.
So on our way down the eastern seaboard, we stopped in Annapolis, Maryland, and attended the famous boat show down there. And I think it was planned, but we bought a new boat. We bought this beautiful 49-foot boat, a Jeanneau 490. It had not been manufactured yet. So we had ordered it, and it was going to take a year to build. So we continued our journey on our 42-foot boat. When we reached the Bahamas, we sold the 42-foot boat. When the new season came, the 49-foot boat arrived, and we picked it up in St. Augustine, Florida, at which point we sailed down the south coast, onto the Florida Keys, to the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, Dominican Republic, and then on to Puerto Rico. Now, for those of you who do not know, hurricane season goes from April to November. Well, yeah, okay, we'll say the beginning of May. And as such, we can't keep our boat in the water during that time because it's too much danger to it being damaged in the event that a hurricane does hit. So we chose Puerto del Rey, which is on the east coast of Puerto Rico, and we actually hauled the boat out there. The reason we hauled the boat out there is because Puerto del Rey is the largest marina in the Caribbean, and it housed over 1,400 boats there in the water. But again, we stored the boat and hauled it out of the water using this fancy-dancy thing called a travel lift, which took us about half a mile inshore, at which point it was put up on stands and strapped down in order to withstand strong winds and such. We did actually get hit by a hurricane, but it was nothing more or less than a major power wash to it. One of the other reasons we chose this particular marina was because we needed to have warranty work done on the boat. It was brand new, and my recommendation to anybody who buys a new boat is to never buy a new boat. Buy one that's used, because on a new boat, everything breaks, and you're stuck trying to get it fixed. But that being said, Puerto Rico was the place for us to go. Easy flights in and out of San Juan. It was like being inside of a U.S. state, a very stable country with currency that we could handle, the U.S. currency, and a lot of the big retailers. So it's a place to provision and prepare the boat for the journeys ahead.
So here's a map of Puerto Rico. The first time we arrived in Puerto Rico, we were coming from the Dominican Republic, an area called Samana. And that was about a 24-hour nonstop sail. So it was an overnight sail. We left Samana at daybreak, and we timed it so that we would arrive in Puerto Rico in the morning, because you never want to go into an unknown port in the middle of the night when it's dark. So we crossed on the west side there. There's a body of water called the Mona Channel, and it is a treacherous channel. It's infamous for bad tides, for currents, because the entire Atlantic Ocean is channeling into the Caribbean Sea through that between the Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. It's pushing through, so it can cause some crazy things. So we needed to pick a weather window very carefully to cross that Mona Channel, and we did. And one of the benefits was as the sun was rising, we were able to see Puerto Rico and the mountain ranges as we were crossing through there. We picked a good, it was a sporty crossing. That's what we sailors like to say when things get a little rough but not too crazy. But it was well chosen. So on this map, you can see circles in red and blue stars. The red star is Fajardo, where was our home base for the marina. The red circles are the main ports where we stopped with the boat, and the blue stars are the main areas that we visited by land. A few quick facts about Puerto Rico. It is about 1,000 miles southeast of Miami. We get a lot of people think, oh, it's just a fly to Miami, it's another hour flight from there. No, it's more like a 3 or 4 hour flight. It is quite far into the Caribbean. The Puerto Rico Trench, which is the body of water just north of there, is the official boundary between the Atlantic and the Caribbean Sea. And it is the deepest part of the Atlantic Ocean at its deepest place, 5.3 miles. Puerto Rico is a territory, not a state, but it has been a U.S. territory since 1917. Puerto Rican citizens are U.S. citizens, but they do have some different rules around voting and so forth, but I'm not going to get into those details, but they are U.S. citizens. The population of Puerto Rico is 3.2 million. Majority of those people live in San Juan, and Spanish and English are the official languages. And I speak very spotty Spanish, but quite honestly, we had no trouble getting along speaking primarily in English. Puerto Rico is known for several things. It is the rum capital of the world. It has a $300 million industry of rum, and 70% of the rum sold in North America comes from Puerto Rico. And it has a national drink, the pina colada, that was incidentally invented there using their own homemade rum called Don Q. Another really cool fact about Puerto Rico, it's home to 3 bioluminescent bays. They're called biobays because it is a body of water where microscopic organisms emit light, creating stunning glow-in-the-dark effects when it's disturbed. And 3 of them are in Puerto Rico, including the brightest one, but we'll tell you more about that later. And there's also some famous Puerto Ricans that you may have heard of before. The former Blue Jay, Roberto Alomar, Jennifer Lopez, Ricky Martin, Benicio del Toro, and Rita Moreno, and many, many others.
The approach to Puerto Rico, our first stop was going to be San Juan, which actually was, again, closer to the east side, so we followed the North Shore along the way. San Juan is an amazing place, to say the least, but also strategically, you can see why it was chosen. It has one of the largest natural harbors in the Caribbean, making it the ideal place for trade. And as such, it was recognized to be quite a military asset. So really around the 1500s, they started building forts here, which you see, which is the large opening to the harbor. We see the Fort Santa Felipe do Moro at the point. You have the Atlantic Ocean there on the left, and you can see the starts of the inner harbor there on the right. So when we came along the North Shore of Puerto Rico, we chose to do this at night because it's the winds and the waves calm down significantly at night, and we were going to be heading right into them. So we did choose to come in at night, but before we got there, it was about 2 or 3 a.m., a funny little story. We're going along, we're approximately 2 miles off the coast, and all of a sudden I look off my side and I see a ship. Not a ship, a boat. But the boat had no lights, and the boat was black, and it started following us. And it followed us for about 2 miles, and all of a sudden, they shone a light on us, a big white light, with no indication. I tried to raise them on the radio. There was no answer. And they just kept following us and ghosting us along the coast. Now, I'm not usually the paranoid of types, but I did start thinking, could this possibly be pirates? Anyways, as it turns out, I've shared the story with many other sailors who have done the north coast of Puerto Rico, and they all experienced the same thing at night. So what it was is we all figured it's the military. They don't advertise it, but they just want to make sure that when we're coming over that we're not smuggling anything or anybody or anything of the sorts. Anyways, onwards and forwards, we approached the harbor of San Juan as day breaks, and the castle, the Fort de More, was there on our bow and presented quite a welcoming to the site. We've done this opening actually twice. Once when we first did Puerto Rico, first coming into it, and then when we did our circumnavigation the following season. The oldest town of Puerto Rico is San Juan, which is the capital of Puerto Rico. It has a population of approximately 2.4 million. It was founded in 1496, excuse me, the second oldest European established capital in the city of the Americas. Old San Juan is like a walled city within the main town that encompasses Felipe de Moro, San Cristobal, and the government mansions. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and quite a place to see with all the hills and cobblestone roads and parks and of that nature. So upon entering the harbor, our first anchorage was right in front of the government mansions and the fort. It was a beautiful anchorage, reasonably calm considering. It was got a little uncomfortable when all the cruise ships, because Puerto Rico, San Juan, I should say, gets in approximately 2 to 3 cruise ships a day. But the problem with staying there was that there was no place to take our dinghy ashore. So it's not like we could have gotten off the boat and then our dinghy being our little tender that takes us to and from shore. And there was no place to land it. So we had to proceed on, further on into the harbor, where we actually came across the anchorage. And you can see some of the cruise ships there. In this harbor, it's very large for the sailors. It's very well known. There are 2 marinas there, plus this anchorage. But again, you have to be very careful of the cruise ships coming in and out. One of the funny stories is that when we lifted the anchor the following day, or after weeks or so of staying in there, we couldn't get the anchor up. And we pulled and we hauled it, and it was snagged onto something. And we managed to get it close to the top of the water when we saw this giant cable overstretching our anchor. Well, we managed to get it off. I had to jump in the water and do everything up. And the following day, all the electricity went out in Puerto Rico. I wonder.
All right. So we anchored in there, actually, and eventually electricity was restored. But then it was time to explore Old San Juan. The rest of San Juan is a modern big city with modern conveniences, shopping malls, Home Depot, grocery stores, Walmarts, Costco, everything. But Old San Juan is really the charming part of San Juan. And you can see here, these are the gates where the dignitaries were welcomed when they would come do their official visits to San Juan back in the day. It's still open to visitors now. There's a sea walk that you can walk through, and it was just a beautiful way to walk into this gorgeous old city. Inside the walls of El Morro, you can see that it's the inside of the wall. I said that 3 times. There is large green spaces, and you're free to walk around wherever you like. You can see me walking out of a little guard tower in there. Huge expanses, beautiful. They're fully accessible, but inside there are museums. We didn't take any photos inside of there. And all of this is managed by the National Park Service in the U.S. people lived there and people died there. So there is a big cemetery inside the walls. And it's lovely, and I think it's a pretty nice way to have a final resting place with a beautiful view. The old city of San Juan is absolutely beautiful. Lovely, beautiful spaces. These are just a couple fountains, colorful buildings, town squares. We were there in December and it was beautifully decorated. It's just an absolute feast for the eyes, and absolutely no wonder why cruise ships show up in Old San Juan every single day. Just a few more shots. San Juan is a town of restaurants, bars, cobblestone streets, shops. The further you get away from the cruise port, the more interesting and more authentic things are. But it's absolutely a beautiful place to be. Well, our time in San Juan came to an end, and it was time to circumnavigate the island. So farewell, San Juan. If you take a look at that photo, that is a photo I took myself, so you can see those massive waves crashing into the fortress. No wonder this place was chosen as a stronghold for the Spanish army. So you need to pick your weather window very carefully, and we did, but I just thought that was a pretty cool shot of the waves. Back to Alan.
So we decided to do a clockwise rotation around the island, and there's good reason behind that. For those of you who do not know, these are known as the trade wind latitudes, which means at this specific latitude relative to the equator, most of the wind, I'd say 95% of the time, comes from the east to the west. So as we head right out of San Juan, we have the wind on the nose, but as we go around the island, you can see we start getting into the lee, or I should say, the shelter of the wind, which makes the cruise a lot more comfortable. We turned right out of San Juan and then through into Fajardo. The red circles represent all the major ports that we stopped in, although we did stop at quite a few others. The blue stars again were land excursions that we made. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about those little islands off to the right. But going along the coast, you couldn't help but be amazed at the mountain ranges, which, like, these mountains were huge, reaching almost to the sky. It was incredible. But they were weather systems upon themselves. You could see the storms accumulating over all of the mountains, and we would just sit there and pray those storms wouldn't come out to sea and hit us. But when they did, you could still see the delineation here on the right between where the storms end and where the clear skies were. It was quite breathtaking. Many sights to be seen along our circumnavigation, one island in particular, which is known as Monkey Island. In 1938, all of the monkeys on the mainland and some of the other places were brought to this island for disease research. Today, it's managed by a university. No humans are allowed onto the island. The scientists that are allowed on there, if you can see on that left picture, that is a caged-in house, or building, I should say. Rather a flip of situations. The people had to stay in the cage. The monkeys were all around them because they would absolutely be devastated by all of the monkeys. In 2017, Hurricane Maria came along and devastated the island, but the monkeys did survive. You would think also now, if we look on to the right, that there would be a lot more green energy in Puerto Rico, especially because they do have such a very fragile electrical grid. But this was the only wind farm that we came across. We have more wind turbines than this in southern Ontario. But still, they did try to make use of it, and I don't think it helps much, because at night there are no street lights there. There's nothing, because they just don't have the electricity or the infrastructure to carry it.
So I'm just going to tell you about some of the coastal villages as we cruise the south shore of Puerto Rico. So many of them are just laid-back coastal villages. There's an example of two of them here, Patillas and Parguera. They're actually on opposite sides of the island. But they are like cottage country. There's small inns, there's small cottages, there's beachy stores and restaurants and bars. It's very much, and beaches, gorgeous beaches. While we were there, it was pretty quiet because it was middle of December. We were told that as soon as the kids got out of school for Christmas break, the place would just explode with activity. And it's very much catering to Puerto Rican tourism, not international or North American, but everyone was incredibly friendly and welcoming, and we were able to enjoy some big anchorages, some great meals, lots of it was just really a very positive environment, and some great anchorages to leave our boat. And just like we have Muskoka, they also have their version of cottage country that is not quite cottagey. If you can see, these are incredible, spectacular mansions that are also all over the south coast. So it's very much like our cottage country. We've got cottages and we've got mansions up north, and that's the way their south coast looks. We had our own private anchorage whenever we wanted it, so if we didn't want to go into a village, we could just drop the hook in large bays that were sheltered and protected. That often meant we had our own private beach, so that's our boat, Meshuggah Squared, sitting all by herself in a big, beautiful bay, and we went to shore and had some nice beach time. And that is until the riffraff moves in. So if you take a look at this magnificent vessel, that is called Kuri, belonging to none other than Jeff Bezos. So we shared anchorages with this magnificent vessel for about 2 weeks, off and on. This boat is 419 feet long. It is the world's second largest sailing vessel. We Googled it, of course, and learned that the annual maintenance on this boat is $30 million US. It frequently travels with a companion vessel because 419 feet is not nearly enough space for Jeff. The companion vessel, Abina, is 246 feet long, and we saw both. So we were kind of back and forth. We don't believe Jeff was aboard. We believe he was off doing whatever billionaires do. But we believe it was his crew that were probably from Puerto Rico, and they were going to shore leave. So when we were actually in Patillas, is the first time we saw them, and there were the small tender boats going back and forth full of people. So I think that was his crew's opportunity to have some downtime and enjoy themselves. But it was quite a beautiful boat. The biggest city in the south of Puerto Rico is called Ponce. It's the Pearl of the South. It was founded in 1692 and named after the great-grandson of the famous explorer Ponce de Leon. It is the second largest city in Puerto Rico with a population of 266,000. If you think back to what we said about San Juan, it is 1/10 the size of San Juan. Although by car it's not that far. But it's an interesting town. It was very prosperous in the 18th and 19th centuries. It became a hub for international shipping. Not surprisingly, the industries that really helped grow Ponce were rum, coffee, corn, and sugarcane. And banking, finance, and iron foundries were also prevalent in that area. However, wars, hurricanes, competition from other islands started to take its toll, and Ponce lost some of its gleam, and San Juan became the bigger, more populous city. However, Ponce is still a prosperous city, and it has an increasing tourism industry, and we were able to spend some time there, and we really enjoyed Ponce. It was a great stop for us because as a big city, it had a lot of opportunity for us to do things like buy groceries. We needed to get some more clothing, a few things like that. They have shopping malls and grocery stores and hardware stores. That's a real luxury for us when we're traveling by boat. And Ponce was able to give us all of that. It was wonderful. And here are just some sights from Ponce. Upper left is a typical is a street in this town square. The town square has fountains, a big cathedral. Down here, this one here, Parque de Bombas, is an old fire hall, and it's now a museum for firefighting. And this here is an old cemetery that at one time was the final resting place for very prosperous and well-known inhabitants of Ponce. Ponce is also home to Castillo Serrales, and the Serrales family immigrated from Spain, and they began planting sugar plantations, and what comes from sugar plantations but rum. So they are the founders of Don Q rum, and Don Q is actually the preferred rum by locals in Puerto Rico. You may have remembered there's about 7 or 8 rums that are made in Puerto Rico. Bacardi's one of them, but that is kind of not the rum that the locals prefer, because Bacardi's actually Cuban. And Puerto Rico was the first place outside of Cuba where there was a rum distillery for Bacardi, but the favorite Puerto Rican rum is Don Q. And Don Q was the rum that was used to make the very first piña colada. They do open the castle for tours. Unfortunately, the day we hiked all the way up that hill, it was closed for a private event, but we were able to walk around the grounds and take some photos outside. This is a very sad story about what happened in Ponce on October 7th of 1985. There was a very poor, impoverished neighborhood where people would build their homes. Ramshackle shacks was a better way to describe them. There were hundreds of homes built into a side of a mountain. They had a school, they had their own community there, and it was there for decades. Unfortunately, on the night of October 7th in 1985, after a series of storms and torrential rains, a mudslide happened, and it resulted in the deadliest single landslide in North America before or since then. It claimed at least 130 lives, although that is just an estimate because many were not found. Today, it remains a memorial. So if anyone does go to Ponce, it's worth to go there and have a moment of silence, thinking of the poor lost souls from this tragedy. Now some fun stuff. Does anyone know where dragon fruit, or in Spanish, pitahaju, comes from? And my family can't answer because they know. It grows on a night-blooming cactus. And we had the opportunity to visit the Hacienda Verde Tahiti. By the way, hacienda means ranch or farm. And it was an incredible day. It used to be a Tahiti lime plantation, but in 2017, Hurricane Maria destroyed it, and they had to replant. And they replanted with these night-blooming cereus cacti. They bloom once a year, and then it takes several weeks for the fruit to form, and then they have 24 hours to harvest that fruit. It's all done by hand, and this has now become a very prosperous eco-farm in the mountains. This farm also is a wholesaler for tropical plants, so that's what they're planting there. And they're beginning a honey trade, and I believe they're also creating a sheep's milk or goat milk production right now. What's really cool about this place, and if we ever go back to that area, I definitely want to stay there. They also have glamping cabins all over the plantation. So can you imagine spending a weekend in this beautiful cabin? It's amongst the cacti. It has your own pool. You have a rooftop, a balcony at the top, and you can overlook the mountains and the sea in the distance. It was absolutely beautiful, and the owner took us on our own personalized tour. You can see her dog came into the cabin with us. So yes, please, if I ever go to that part again, I will absolutely do some glamping there. So how do you like your morning cafe? Which is the way they say it in Spanish. Puerto Rico is known for coffee. Rich mountain soil and the climate is ideal for coffee. and the Puerto Ricans will only drink their coffee black. We had an opportunity to go to a coffee hacienda, and as you can see here, these are the coffee beans on the tree. These are ripe coffee berries. There's some black ones in here that are not ripe, and that means that the coffee beans must be harvested by hand because they do not ripen at the same rate. So they're growing into a mountainside, and it's an incredible hard job. And then this hacienda was a fairly small one, so they do all of their own slow roasting and processing of the coffee, and then they sell their coffee right there on site. Does chocolate grow on trees? Guess what? The Puerto Rican mountains are also an excellent place to grow cacao. So this is a cacao tree. We also went to a different hacienda, and this was a crazy ride. We rented these sedans, drove up a mountain that I swear the thing was going to flip backwards halfway up the mountain, and these ruts, parked in a little parking space, and then they came and picked us up in ATVs and took us up even higher over worse roads. But it was absolutely worth the trip because we were able to walk through the cacao plantation, learn about how cacao grows and is harvested. And the number one predator for cacao beans, the mongoose. It's also a carrier of rabies. So you can see on this tree, there they are. That's one of the pods growing right there. There's another one over there. And then we were treated to a demonstration where they cut open the cacao pods and let us taste it through various processes. And a very interesting fact, the owner told us, she said she grew up eating Hershey Kisses and loves Hershey Kisses to this day, but she said they're not chocolate. In fact, most of the chocolate bars you buy at the grocery store are not chocolate at all. So next time you're shopping for chocolate, flip over the package, read the label, and cacao is probably not listed, or if it is, it's the very last one. It's a very, very small amount of a chocolate bar. So real chocolate is cacao. And what she said is, your Hershey's may be a very delicious candy, but it's not chocolate.
There are only a few rainforests in North America, but San Juan or Puerto Rico is the home of the only tropical rainforest in the United States. El Yuque, which is in the northeastern part of Puerto Rico, is a tropical rainforest, and all I can explain to try to describe it is that it was like walking through a scene of Jurassic Park, minus the dinosaurs, of course. It was huge, dense, diverse foliage, fragrant flowers, very large, gigantic bamboo shoots, waterfalls, extreme humidity, and just out of nowhere it would start raining and stop, raining and stop. If you remember on that picture when we were going along the coast that I showed you back, that with all of those giant rainfalls, or I should say the rainstorms in the mountains, this is where the rainforest was, so you could understand what it was like walking through there. So the question is, have you ever been to Vieques or heard of Vieques and Culebra? These are the two islands that are to the east of Puerto Rico, and they are also known as the Spanish Virgin Islands. Now, most people have heard of the British Virgin Islands. Some have heard of the U.S. Virgin Islands, and these indeed are the Spanish Virgin Islands. It was named by Christopher Columbus on his second voyage in 1493, and he named all sets of those three Virgin Islands after Saint Ursula and the 11,000 virgins. So this is how it got their name. So I'm just looking here, yes. So you can see the largest island on the bottom is Vieques, and then up in the top right is Culebra with its offshoot Culebrita there on the right. I'm going to start with Vieques as we go down south along the southern shore that we went. Vieques is home of the brightest bioluminescent bay in the world, and it was a sight to be seen. It's on a little bay called Mosquito Bay, and we took our windsurfer in with us at night, our paddleboard, I should say, yeah, no windsurfers, paddleboard in, and it's like the magic of Disneyland. As you wave your hand through the water, it's like a trail of Dixie angels following behind you, just little glowing lights. As you put the paddle through the water, push your leg through, any disturbance of the water would bring up this bioluminescence. And it was like something out of the movie Avatar. I can't begin to explain to you how magical it was. Unfortunately, it's so dim that photography couldn't pick it up. So we really have nothing to show you there. But it is the one place, if ever you do go to Puerto Rico, you get over to Vieques, you have to check out these bioluminescent bay. The southern shore of Vieques was also known for the black sand beaches there, which is basically volcanic sand. The picture makes it look gray, but when you're standing out there at the water, it is totally black. Then we moved north to the main island of Culebra, and this is home of the $1 million sport fisher boats. This is where Puerto Rico comes to play. All the rich people play in all the big boats. Although smaller boats could get in there too. There is a beautiful natural hurricane hole harbor in there, which we pulled into, and there were tons of boats there. It's the place to party. But if you don't have a boat, who sponsors the ferry service? There's a Puerto Rican public transportation system that provide a ferry from the mainland, from Fajardo to Culebra for a mere $2 a person.
Unless you're 60 or older, then it's $1.
Yeah, if you're 60 or older, it's $1. So it is definitely the party place to be. Just drop the hook in this huge protected bay and dinghy around to the public dock. And it was quite a magical little island. Everybody, again, as I say, there are restaurants lining the canal. There's a canal actually that splits Culebra, the main island, into two with a bridge, but the bridge is not tall enough for any large boats to get underneath it. But they do have traffic going through it, and most people come to Culebra, they rent an Airbnb, and they rent a golf cart and explore the island. Because it's not only the partying that's there, Culebra is home of one of the most beautiful beaches. It's rated, as one of the 10 most beautiful beaches in the world. This harbor, or I should say this bay, which is about 1.5 miles to 2 miles in diameter, just watching the surf come in, huge surf, and it was like a set of dominoes. Every time the wave would break on one part of the shore, you could see the wave just breaking like a giant set of dominoes all around the horseshoe of the island, and you could just sit there for hours watching these waves break. But not to mention the sand was a beautiful white, crystalline, and a beautiful place to swim when the lifeguards would let you in if the certain areas where the waves were not breaking that much.
Okay. And if you're on Culebra, and if weather permits, you can pop over to the little one, Cublerita. Cublerita is an uninhabited natural reserve, and it is protected and surrounded by reefs, really, really big reefs. So it's very challenging to get in there with a keelboat like ours, unless the weather is absolutely perfect. We got lucky, and the weather was perfect, and we were able to get into this very beautiful protected reef. Little tour boats do come in, and we're talking about like little 17-foot boats that will bring in people for the day, and you can buy a ticket from Culebra to go there. But if you're lucky enough to get in, you can see that's us in this beautiful little protected bay. They do police it. You're not allowed to physically be on the island between, I think it's 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., but you're allowed to be on your boat in the bay. And this island is a wonderful place to walk around and explore. We climbed to the top of the hill, and that is an old abandoned lighthouse. From at the top of the hill, you can see 360 views of the Caribbean, of Puerto Rico mainland, and on a clear day, which we had, we could see the U.S. Virgin Islands in the distance as well. In fact, the photo that that was announcing us, you can see us standing at the top of the hill, and in the distance, those mountains are the U.S. Virgin Islands. And these are natural bubbly pools. So when a wave comes, you get this massive wave come in, but by the time it hits you there, it just waves you around a little bit. It's absolutely spectacular. We loved exploring it, but we've got to be careful where you step. This is an actual sign that I took a picture of. From 1941 to 2001, the U.S. Navy was stationed in the Spanish Virgin Islands, and they used it as target practice. It's where they did their bombing exercises. And they bombed all the islands. There's still a tank on the beach in Culebra, but Vieques got the worst of it, but Culebrita was also bombed. So you see these signs there. Unfortunately, in 1999, a civilian was killed in a bombing exercise, and the protests grew very, very strongly after that. And in 2001, they stopped bombing the islands, and by 2003, the U.S. Navy had left the Spanish Virgin Islands. However, they cannot guarantee that all unexploded ordnance is gone. So it's not uncommon to see signs like this to be careful where you step. If you see anything, to call a phone number so that they can come and get those nasty things out of there. If you stick to the well-marked trails, you're fine because it's been a couple decades and those things have been cleared. But if you like to go exploring into the brush, you got to be careful where you step. So do they celebrate Christmas in Puerto Rico? As you can see, little Ziggy there is doing what any normal cat will do. Christmas tree, let me see if I can knock it over. Clearly you can see by the look on his face he was busted before he could do any damage. But don't worry, he got to it later. Puerto Ricans love Christmas. These are just a few shots from malls, stores, businesses, town squares. That middle one is from San Juan. It is absolutely crazy. We went into a shopping mall and here we have some decorations and music and a Santa. They have every single corner of that mall covered in Christmas. Every small boutique, there's Christmas everywhere. It was a really cool time to be there. And even the boats get into it. So this is just a small sampling of a boat parade that we could see when we were there. This one was actually in Ponce. We were anchored right by them, and it was absolutely amazing. They had animations and music and blow-ups, and I think for an hour we just sat in amazement of watching every boat, big, small, everything, just parading by with all their Christmas decorations. We were kind of scratching our head of what their power supply was, but it was pretty amazing. So yes, Puerto Rico is very festive during the Christmas season. All right, well, that brings us to the end. Adios, hasta luego, which means see you later. We hope that this tour of Puerto Rico has inspired some of you to get on a boat, get on a plane, go visit this magical island. There's so much to see and do. And we'll be back there again in about a month, and hopefully that won't be the last time either. Thank you.